Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq, with daily insight on the Nasdaq-100 index, or the NDX, which is made up of 100 of the largest domestic and international non-financial innovative companies listed on Nasdaq. The NDX has been the barometer for U.S. large cap growth and also one of the best performing indexes over the last decade and a half, not to mention one of the most liquid index ecosystems in the world. Joining us this Wednesday afternoon, we have Ryan McCormack, factor and core equity strategist at Invesco, to discuss Nasdaq-100 weekly performance. And of course, we have to take a look at what oil has been doing. That really has been quite the story of the day. Ryan, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks. And let's take a look at that weekly performance in the Nasdaq-100. And of course, with the rest of the indexes, pretty volatile moves this week.
Yeah, absolutely. QQQM down 5.25%. That's versus the S&P 500 down 3.15%, and S&P 500 value down 1.35%. Over the past week, there's really not much else to say other than geopolitical risks rule. There's a lot of speculation around the conflict, around events, but it's just merely that, speculation. So, obviously headlines have kind of ruled the markets over the past number of months. First, it was more COVID driven, then inflation, now more of course Russia, Ukraine. So equity markets over the past week, it's been very clearly risk off, and it looks to be that volatile those volatile swings that we've looked at over the past number of weeks seem to be continuing today, but to the upside.
Right. And Ryan, it's not even day to day. I mean, it is, you could be in the morning, it could be, within 10 minutes, as we'll see in the oil chart in just a bit. But if we look at sector performance over the week, is there anything you can identify there that either somewhat outperformed or underperformed?
Yeah, from a QQQ perspective or a Nasdaq-100 perspective, growth was largely shunned, right? So you have tech and communication services both down over 5% within Nasdaq-100. Discretionary down over 8%. Clearly energy was the winner through yesterday, up 8.6%. Utilities were positive as well, kind of leaning towards that risk off. You have people kind of gravitating towards utilities. But in the midst of all of this and the conflict and headlines, it is important to maintain sight of other stuff that's going on, right? If we do eventually get a resolution, markets' attention will largely shift back towards inflation, towards the Fed, towards earnings. And as we look tonight, we have CrowdStrike reporting. Tomorrow we have JD.com and DocuSign. And of course, next week we have the Fed meeting on the 15th through the 16th, widely anticipated for Fed liftoff, but it will obviously be very closely watched in terms of any changing language from Jerome Powell, and certainly how the Fed is viewing impacts from the Russia-Ukraine conflict, excuse me.
All right, and let's take a look at our last chart here, Ryan. Of course, oil, and really that's what's been driving the market to the up and downside, and within intraday fashion.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, this is today's intraday chart on Brent crude oil, so the active futures contract. Just to kind of set the stage here, year to date, Brent is up over 66% through yesterday. Today, it's down nearly 13%. Right, so number one, to start off, you had kind of this reiteration of the Ukrainian president talking about how he's open to a compromise. He needs Putin at the table. This is kind of the way that it's been going, but at some fashion, a light at the end of the tunnel here, I think is somewhat positive for crude oil prices. Beyond that, though, we have a very large energy conference, and a lot of these players talking about how they can turn supply back on. You have OPEC talking about how there really isn't a supply-demand imbalance at the moment because there's no shortage of oil. So, you start to see kind of these headlines come out, and very clearly, like the rest of the market, you'll see very large and in some cases violent swings. In this case, it's violent to the downside for crude oil prices, and to the upside for equity markets getting a little bit of a relief rally. Some of those dip buyers coming back into the market. But I think volatility will reign supreme. I think we'll need to keep an eye on the headlines, but underneath all of it, Fed meeting next week is something to certainly take note of.
All right, Ryan, appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq.